Daniel Hill, pastor of River City Community Church, was all of a sudden awakened to the way we see ourselves and each other and hasn't looked back. He's written a book taking on race and privilege and the roles we all play in improving the world we live in. The book is called White Awake. And here he is, a white pastor at a church in Humboldt Park. What made you write this book?
Well, the beginning of the journey came. I was working at a large white suburban church called Willow Creek out in the suburbs of Chicago, and I was in my 20s, a young officiant, a young minister, and I was officiating a wedding. It was the first cross-cultural wedding I had done, and the groom was of Indian descent, and he told me beforehand that at the rehearsal dinner I'd kind of do a deep dive into Indian culture, which I was looking forward to, and it very much was. It was very outside of kind of my cultural norm, and so when the rehearsal dinner ended, I went and gave what I intended to be a compliment. I said, "Wow, you've got so much culture. I'm jealous of you. I don't have any culture, and thank you for inviting me into this." Yeah, well, he kind of stopped. He got very serious. He put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Daniel, not only do you have a culture, but when your culture comes in contact with other cultures, it almost always wins. It would be a great idea for you to learn about your culture."
It's called America. What have you learned from writing this book? How did you research this book?
Well, as a white person, my initial instinct when the light bulb started to go off was where a lot of our instincts is. I started asking, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? And I just started kind of haphazardly trying to improve race relations. And through a series of events, I really came to a conclusion that what am I supposed to do is probably the wrong question to start off, that there's just a whole reality I don't understand. And I really had to embrace a different reality that says, I'm blind when it comes to this. I don't understand why we are where we are. I don't understand why the divisions are as bad as they are. And so I went on a kind of a blindness to sight journey, and that's really kind of what's driven a lot of my quest.
And a lot of the people you came in contact with thought the same way you do. Oh, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. How do I do this? Do they not read history books?
Well, I mean, I do think that's part of our history. I think there's kind of selective history about what's talked about and what's not. So I think that there's an ignorance that's not always chosen. There's just an ignorance because we're not taught a lot of these things that we need to be wrestling with and understanding.
What are you teaching people in the book?
I borrow a lot. So I try to help folks understand that we use these terms interchangeably, like ethnicity, culture, race, but I think it's not helpful. I really am trying to help people understand race, that race, ethnicity and culture has always been part of who we are. Race is created by human beings for a really diabolical and evil purpose. Its entire invention is to separate and create.
Divide.
Yeah, right, superiority and inferiority. And I think until people understand what the system of race is and how it's 100% evil and diabolical, I think it's hard to understand where we are and how we got here.
And what do people tell you? I mean, you were saying how they don't know how to talk to black people. They don't have black people in their life, or even people of color in their life.
Yeah. Well, I think it's true. I was just listening to Dr. Beverly Tatum, who wrote that great book, Why Do All the Black Kids Sit Together in the Cafeteria? And her latest research shows that 75% of white people don't have a single person of color in their social network. That's today's day and age. 75%
in 2018.
In 2018, 75% of white people don't have a single person of color in their social network.
So have we made gains? I mean, we had a black president. Did that help us in any way with race relations?
When I'm trying to wrestle with this or help other white folks wrestle with it, like one of the things I try to steer us away from, but I think is what we try to do. I think for a lot of us who are white, we've got a very simple definition of racism. We often think that racism is when an individual person does something or says something bad to a person of color. And so the driving energy for a lot of us becomes, how do I prove I'm not racist, that I'm not participating in these things, right?
But it's much more intricate than that, isn't it?
I think it is much more, and I actually think it's a lot of wasted energy when we try to figure out who's racist and who's not. Some of what's been helpful for me is to realize that race is a sickness. There's a narrative. Brian Stevenson uses this great term. He calls it the narrative of racial difference. He says you won't understand race until you understand the narrative of racial difference, that when race was created 300-400 years ago, however you want to say that, around colonialism, around slavery, we created a narrative that says there's a sliding scale of human value.
It's taught.
Yeah, right.
Racism is taught.
Right, it's taught, right? That whiteness is most valuable, blackness is least valuable. I hate saying it, but that's how the narrative works.
It's taught in everyone's home.
It's taught in everyone's home. It's taught in the systems and structures of our society, and it's a sickness in the
But why don't people get that?
I don't know, but I do think until we get that, we're not going to make any progress.
Sundays are, they say, one of the most segregated days in the world, ever, because the whites go to their church, the blacks go to their church. Do you agree?
That it's segregated?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would still say it's segregated, yeah.
How do we change that, or can we change that?
Yeah, my best shot would be, again, the title of this book, around awakening. I think especially those of us who come from the dominant culture, there's a lot we have to come to understand, and it's not as simple as we need to invite people into our world, because until we understand how we got to where we are and the deadly kind of nature of how race works, I honestly don't think we're capable of participating in that.
Are whites, learning from your book, afraid of people of color? I mean, in a lot of ways. I mean, power, money, safety.
You know, I hate doing overgeneralizations. There's been kind of three large groups, I'd say, of responses. Like I'd say there's one group of white who feel just kind of threatened by this conversation and don't engage with it a lot.
And they don't talk about it, you say. That's the thing, they don't
right,
talk about
it. There's just a lot of denial and distancing from it. I'd say on the other side, there's a group that is very actively engaged in trying to understand. And then there's just kind of this big group in the middle that is starting to realize that things are more problematic than they gave credit to, that we're not in this post-racial society.
Right, that
on
we
the other
said.
side of President Obama. Yeah, things are still as bad in a lot of ways as they've ever been, and they're seeking to understand. And so that's probably where most of the conversations I'm having are with.
What's the reaction been to your book by people of color, by whites?
I feel thankful. The people who have been most enthusiastic about the book have been, for the most part, people of color and actively sharing that within their white networks, which is meaningful. It comes out of, you know, it's the people of color in my own church community that have been so instrumental in my own development process. Again, I'd say on the scale of whiteness, there's been some folks who have really responded well and said it's helpful, and there's some folks who get pretty mad and defensive and mean, you know, about it.
But one of the things you say, which could tone down racism or maybe eliminate it someday, is to talk about it, right? And nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah, I think that is one of the challenges. Yeah.
And that's what your book, you want to do with your book, to start stimulate
yeah,
conversation.
talk about it, and then to try to get people to talk about the right things, right? Because again, I think we can focus, like, if what we're talking about is proving that I'm not a racist, then that's the wrong conversation.
Right.
But if what we're talking about is the sickness of it and the way it's infected my mind, it's infected the social systems in our structure, then we're having the right conversation, and I think we can make some real progress.
Is our society today fueling the fire with what's going on politically, you know, socially? Is it fueling the fire to racism?
I mean, yes, I think, but I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. You know, I think you could potentially make the argument that we need to pull back the veil and see what things really are before we can make progress. And so, yes, I think the fire is being fueled, and I think there's some pain with that. But I think the jury's still out of whether that's actually going to be helpful to the long-term progress or not.
So it may be a good thing.
I think there's a possible venue or possible road where that wouldn't be the case.
And do you study it? Do you look at it? Do you think about it? Do you get ready for your second book, White, Awake Again? White, wake up!
I do think, it's very core to our faith community. We talk about this a lot. We believe that God's created all people to be equal, that to be seen in God's image, and anything that disparages the humanity of another person, I think, is a real threat to the moral fiber of people of all backgrounds.
Yeah, well, to me, it's simple. You treat someone the way you want to be treated. Why don't people get it?
Yeah, I think that's the end goal we want to get to. I think the other thing I'm just trying to work with folks is to understand there's a reason our schools and incarceration system and police system don't treat people equal. And so while we want to call people to that, we have to also understand how deep it goes, the sickness that got us to this point. And I think, to become well, you have to understand the sickness, and you know that feels like a big part of the journey too.
And the conversation continues. Thank you so much for coming in.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And awakened all of us.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here with you.
Good luck to you. Thank you. The honor is all ours. You can find more about River City Church and Pastor Daniel Hill's book at PastorDanielHill.com.